We're rapidly approaching a time of change. Next-gen consoles are coming, enabling richer, more complex worlds, ultra-dense visuals and more. Transition is already beginning, but one thing is constant: the PC, the ever-evolving platform where the vast majority of key technological innovations in the gaming space make their debut. Point is, though, that PC's pioneering technologies will become mainstream components of Sony and Microsoft's next-gen boxes. Consoles define the baseline of most major game developments. So, to continue to get the best performance in the PC space, you may need to buy a new unit or upgrade your current one in order to keep pace. So, what components should you be considering? How do you best future-proof your PC? In this video, brought to you by Digital Foundry and Nvidia, I'll be giving you my recommendations on where you may need to upgrade, using the information about the new consoles I've learned from their system architects, as well as the techniques on display in the first full next-gen engine demo that we've seen. So let's take a look at what currently constitutes a mainstream gaming PC, starting with a list of the most popular graphics cards as seen on the Steam hardware survey, based on April 2020 data. The top 5 cards here represent a massive 32.7% of the full sample, and in terms of capability, GTX 1070 is the most powerful GPU here, 1050 the least. Interestingly, the number 1 card, GTX 1060, does represent a midpoint of sorts. This benchmark gives you some basic idea of the spread here. All of these graphics cards are considerably more powerful than the current generation PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. That's progress, but yeah, next-gen consoles will shift the goalposts. One thing to be aware of about Steam hardware survey data, I think it's based on logged-in users, and based on how popular gaming cafes are in some places of the world, different users may be connecting to Steam but using the same hardware, which may skew results, but still, regardless. If you go back down the GPU list, AMD's most popular graphics cards are RX 580 and RX 570, and they sit within the same power bands that I defined earlier. So whichever way you slice it, the point I'm trying to make here stands. CPU now, quad-core is the most popular at 48.9%, followed by 6-core processors at 22.6%. Then there's dual-core way back at 19.7%. 8-core processors are relatively low on the list at just 6.8%, and therein lies the first major revelation. Both PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X have more CPU cores than the vast majority of the most popular gaming PCs out there right now, and they're based on the latest AMD Zen 2 design. Meanwhile, in the graphics space, the new consoles are more powerful or have more next-gen GPU features than 18 of the 20 most popular GPUs listed on the Steam hardware survey. The final key innovation the new consoles deliver is solid-state storage, using PCI Express 4.0 for extreme bandwidth. I'll tackle this one a bit later on, as that topic is quite complex. Okay, well, let's cut straight to it. Let's talk recommendations on key components for future-proofing your PC. But before we do, don't feel panicked into immediately upgrading if you already own a decent gaming PC. Expect the shift towards next-gen to happen fairly gradually when the new consoles arrive. The point being that games development will be entering a cross-gen phase. The old machines will still be supported, which in turn means that a mainstream PC still has much to offer. But the focus of this video is about future-proofing, about looking to the years ahead. So let's dig in. If you're building or buying a PC in the here and now, it all starts with your choice of platform. Intel, AMD, they both have their strengths and weaknesses. They both have the foundation and the upgradability to deliver more CPU power than the next-gen consoles. And they'll support graphics cards for years to come, obviously. It's difficult to avoid the conclusion that AMD delivers the best all-round package at the moment, specifically the mid-range B550 boards, and if you've got a bit more cash to spare, the higher-end X570 boards. They deliver support for up to 16-core processors in the here and now. They'll support the next generation Ryzen processors. They run any new memory module kit at its full rated bandwidth, and crucially, storage-wise, they run full bandwidth PCI Express 4.0. Intel, with its new Socket 1200 platform, a bit more difficult to recommend. On the one hand, Core i5, i7 and i9 overclockable K chips are faster than any current gen Ryzen, but you pay a hefty premium for using them to their fullest extent, owing to clock speed reductions and limitations on memory bandwidth on mid-range motherboards. Anything other than a high-end rig using an expensive Z490 board won't be that much faster than Ryzen. Crucially, the current 10th gen core processors do not support PCI Express 4.0. This may or may not be a deal breaker, but we'll get back to this shortly. If I were buying or building a PC right now, I'd be looking at a platform that does the following. Number 1, supports 8-core processors with a visible upgrade path to later generation chips and more cores in the here and now. Number 2, compatible with PCI Express 4.0. And finally, number 3, supports the full memory bandwidth of the memory kits you're purchasing. This list of prerequisites generates one outcome, an AMD system. Personally, I think a mid-range B550 board will do the job. But yeah, X570 is there if you have the cash available. Just make sure that the board you buy has 4 memory slots available, and I'll explain why shortly. All of which leads us on to the next key component, the CPU. Both of the next-gen consoles use 8-core, 16-thread Zen 2 chips. It's one of the biggest generational leaps the new machines provide. The consoles also provide hardware decompression technology on the chip that PC doesn't have, and it's likely that PC will require extra horsepower and likely extra memory to cover that. My baseline recommendation for a machine in the here and now, Ryzen 5 3600, 6 cores, 12 threads, and that should be more than enough to cover the cross-gen period of the next couple of years. And if you're on the B550 platform, I recommend you'll have access to more cores and next-gen Ryzen CPUs if you need them. Ryzen 7 3700X is also a very good call and may well be more future-proof, but certainly in the here and now from a gaming perspective, you don't see much benefit versus the 3600. So that's our recommendations for the platform and the CPU sorted. Now let's move on to graphics, which is a pretty crucial upgrade. When John and I visited Microsoft in March to check out Xbox Series X, the Coalition showed us internal benchmarks from Gears 5 running on PC and Xbox Series X. On the PC side of things, Nvidia's RTX 2080 showed a slim lead over the Series X, but they were virtually the same. In essence, Microsoft's pitch was that Series X would be on par or close to the 2080. Meanwhile, for PlayStation 5, our information is that the GPU would be comparable to RTX 2070 or 2070 Super, depending on how its boost clocks actually work out. Now, all things considered, that's pretty expensive hardware, but there are a couple of things to remember here. Specifically, that these consoles are targeting 4K displays, while most PC gamers out there are still using 1080p or 1440p screens, which automatically lowers the GPU requirement. I'll talk in a bit about PC exclusive technologies that could also make a profound difference, but 2060 Super, 2070, 2070 Super, 2080, that kind of power band, that's the kind of next-gen console territory based on the information we have so far. These cards do have equivalents in raw rasterization throughput. Cards like Radeon 7, 5700 XT, GTX 1080, 1080 Ti. But to my mind, equally as important as performance is the feature set. Hardware accelerated ray tracing, deep learning features, support for next-gen geometry features like mesh shading. These are aspects the next generation consoles have, and they're also not supported by those cards I just mentioned. Here and now, choices that do have those features are exclusively Nvidia, and we'll just have to wait and see how AMD equivalents pan out. But they are announced, they are coming. On the PC side, underpinning all of this will be DirectX 12 Ultimate, which brings together a big bunch of technologies found in Xbox Series X and opens the door to them on PC. Current generation GPUs, even those that don't support ray tracing, will get some level of fallback support from DX12 Ultimate, but future-proofing wise, whichever vendor you end up choosing, I do feel that DX12 Ultimate compatibility is a must, and I also strongly recommend at least 8 GB of VRAM. Most people buy a graphics card that is expected to last for 2 or 3 years. That takes us to 2023, and so yeah, I fully expect ray tracing, mesh shaders, variable rate shading to be prevalent in that time period. So our parts list is coming together then. A platform that supports many core processors and PCI Express 4.0, a graphics card that's validated for DirectX 12 Ultimate. I want to talk next quickly about memory. Bit of a tricky one this, because the way that the new consoles lean on storage to enhance memory availability is likely going to be handled a little bit differently on PC. How differently? Well, until we're further along the transition, we don't know. So I'd recommend flexibility. For a Ryzen-based gaming system in the here and now, 16 GB of DDR4 memory across two 8GB modules is really good. But remember, I recommended having 2 extra slots, 4 in total. What this allows for is future expandability. Now there's one final component we need to discuss, and it's a crucial one: solid-state storage. PlayStation 5 has what Epic Games' Tim Sweeney told me was God-tier level bandwidth when I spoke to him about the UE5 tech demo. PS5 SSD can stream in about 5.5 GB per second of data uncompressed, closer to 9 GB of compressed data. Series X, 2.4 GB of uncompressed data, closer to 4.8 GB per second compressed. And remember, I was talking about the hardware decompression silicon built into both consoles. PC doesn't have that, and to match it, throughput is going to be challenging. Now, the good news is that DirectX 12 Ultimate at least liberates PC from some of its sort of legacy I/O API limitations, but even today's fastest NVMe drives for PC will struggle to match what either of the consoles are doing in the here and now. With that said though, DirectX 12 Ultimate also provides support for something called shader feedback sampling. The idea is to reduce the bandwidth required from storage by only loading in texture data that's actually needed. And texture data is by far the biggest consumer of bandwidth. According to Microsoft, the actual data required, the actual data that would be brought in via shader feedback sampling, is around 1/3 to 1/2 of the texture data used in games today. So in theory then, this could go a long way into sorting out this big storage bandwidth deficit that we're presented with on PC. Interestingly, Sony hasn't mentioned any kind of shader feedback sampling support for PlayStation 5. Now that's not to say it doesn't have it, but with the drive that Sony has, the storage, the raw bandwidth, perhaps it doesn't need it. But where does this leave us in terms of recommending a PC SSD? Well, let's talk about how the situation is in the here and now. Right now, I think it's just important to be running games from an SSD, full stop. SATA-based drives still offer the best price versus performance mix. NVMe only offers diminishing returns in gaming in the here and now. My key piece of advice here is simply to ensure that you do have NVMe functionality in a system designed with future-proofing in mind. So let's round up my recommendations for PC with a sound foundation in future-proofing. Firstly, a modern platform that supports many core processors and has a clear upgrade path, along with PCI Express 4.0 NVMe slots. Secondly, at least a 6-core 12-thread processor. And of course, bearing in mind that graphics hardware is typically used for 2 or 3 years, if you're buying a GPU in the here and now, a DirectX 12 Ultimate compatible graphics card is the most logical buy, and the more memory you can get there, the better. Personally, I recommend 8 GB as the minimum. Ray tracing, we've seen already that it does require a lot of VRAM in many scenarios. So these are my recommendations for buying a PC in the here and now with future-proofing in mind. But what if you already own a pretty modern PC? Well, from what I understand, while GPUs tend to be upgraded every 2 to 3 years, the underlying platform tends to stay in use for around 4 to 5 years. Well, any system that supports 8th gen core from Intel can accommodate 6 cores and 12 threads. That should be reasonably powerful enough to accommodate the cross-gen years. You should also have an upgrade path to 8-core 16-thread processors like the Core i9-9900K. If your system is based on a 1st and 2nd gen Ryzen, you do have overclocking to circa 4 GHz, you do have up to 8 cores, and you can run fast memory, and your board may support an upgrade to Ryzen 3000. Typically, in the scenarios I've just described, whether you're using an AMD or an Intel system, PCI Express 3.0 NVMe is supported. You should be able to get 3 GB per second drives there, which are expensive in the here and now, but I'd expect them to become cheaper fairly soon. Now, this is still a lot slower than the kind of storage we're seeing in PlayStation 5, but certainly as a stopgap until you embrace a PCI Express 4.0 based system, it should do the job. In truth though, there's just so much we don't know about the implications for storage in the next-gen era, and it may well be that other aspects of the SSD come to the fore. Bandwidth is important, but so is sustained bandwidth. Random access may also be of crucial importance. Right now we just don't know. At the very least, I do think that a PCI Express 3.0 solution should hold you over for the cross-gen period. So if I were buying a new PC or upgrading an existing one in the here and now, those are the directions I would be heading in. But I want to end this video by turning things on their head a bit. See, I kind of feel I'm giving the impression here that the PC has to play catch-up to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Now, on the one hand, when you look at the Steam hardware survey data that I presented earlier to get an idea of the critical mass of PC hardware that's out there, well, yes, a lot of users will be playing catch-up, and there the choice of upgrade will be vital. But let's check off the key innovations that we're seeing in the next-gen consoles. A modern CPU architecture? PCs have had that for years. Faster, more capable GPUs? Well, RTX 2070, 2080, they came out in 2018, 2 years ahead of the delivery date of the new consoles. Hardware accelerated ray tracing, mesh shaders, variable rate shading, deep learning acceleration. Yes, the PC hardware market may well be in transition there, but bottom line is that the format has been the testing bed for all of these technologies, well, as I said, since 2018. So what about the 120Hz display support? Variable refresh rate compatibility? Well, I remember owning a 120Hz screen, I think back in 2010. G-Sync variable refresh rate debuted on PC in 2015. So yeah, let's not forget that it's PC that brings all of these technologies to the market first. It's also interesting to note that while the PlayStation 5 Unreal Engine tech demo gave us our first real glimpse of a generational leap in visuals, the Chinese engineer at Epic Games did claim to be able to run the demo on a gaming laptop with an RTX 2080, with Epic themselves saying that the current Unreal Engine 5 doesn't even tap into DX12 Ultimate yet. Meanwhile, we also know that most of the geometry here is processed using software-based compute shaders, not the next-gen mesh shaders, which on PS5 at least are used sparingly. It's a reminder that generational leaps are driven just as much by software as by hardware. And actually, in the case of Unreal Engine 5, that's principally developed for multi-platform deployment. And let's not forget, fundamentally, most third-party games have to support as much hardware as possible. And yeah, I genuinely think that this cross-gen period will sort of possibly extend for a year, maybe 2 years. So yeah, another thing to consider going forward. These new consoles are fixed designs, architected to be the baseline games platform for the next 6-7 years. PC, of course, continues to evolve more gradually. It's first with all of those key technological leaps. Nvidia's Turing architecture already has the key GPU features of next-gen, while technologies like DLSS, deep learning supersampling, continue to push the envelope, and it's unclear how consoles will compete there. The evidence certainly suggests that Xbox Series X, PS5, they don't have the same level of bespoke deep learning acceleration, more like grafted add-ons to the existing shaders. So, interesting real-world example here. Now, I've seen Minecraft DXR running on Xbox Series X. Looks great. It's an early demo, sure, but it's based on the same code foundation as Minecraft RTX, which is in beta now. DLSS AI upscaling sees the RTX 2060 comfortably outperform what I saw running on Series X. Native 1080p on the X, sure, DLSS 1080p on RTX 2060, but the overall image quality is much the same, and performance is higher on the PC side. And obviously this opens the door to 2080 class hardware delivering the same experience at 4K. So yeah, just one example there of how PC continues to lead in terms of innovation. And of course, we've still got a new generation of PC graphics hardware to come, which I'd hope to see arriving ahead of the next generation consoles. Okay, so that's all from me for now. Hope you appreciated the insight into how next-gen consoles fit into the overall progression of gaming technology and how best to prepare your PC for the next-gen era of gaming. But that's all from me for now. Like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed the work, and ring the bell for instant notifications whenever Digital Foundry posts new content. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching.